Welcome back. This is a blog post series, specifically, not specifically, but from an older post I did originally in 2017, or a series of posts called Music, a Tool to Change Mood, a Personal History. So in this one I'm going to talk about that and expand on it. Could be short, could be long. I'm not sure yet, because, I wing things. So first things first, this podcast is brought to you by Urban Tactics Krav Maga, turning lambs into lions. You can follow us on social media, Instagram, Urban Tactics Krav Maga, Twitter, Urban Tactics KM, Facebook, Urban Tactics Krav Maga. You can also get the older posts, older podcasts on the blog there, UTKMblog.com. You just click on podcasts and scroll down. You have all of the older ones. Even the less refined ones are still there. You can also sign up for PAL courses there if you're in Metro Vancouver. I run the PAL courses periodically. That's the firearms course required to get your firearms license. I recommend everyone do that now, not later, for various reasons. And of course, if you love the podcast, you can actually support us directly on the menu at utkmblog.com under Support Us. You can simply donate to us, though it's not a tax write-off because we're not a charity. And some people have already done that, so thank you. And if you want to just support us outright, you can do that. And you are getting something because content that you like to listen to. You can also educate yourself by going to utkmu.com and signing up for one of the various packages. It's still a work in progress, but you basically have the entire beginner and novice curriculums up there in video format. And of course, the more people supporting UTKM globally, the more content I can do. Perhaps one day I'll even be able to hire someone to help me, and then I can pump out a crap load of content. Of course, if you want to volunteer for the services, please feel free to reach out to me specifically. Right, so you can go to utkmu.com and sign up. That's as little as $15 a month. Or you can also support us on the support page. Support us on utkmblog.com. You can click on the various Amazon affiliate links that I have, mostly for books I recommend. I have my coffee and a very respected supplement that I use to help my body stay healthy. It helps with mitochondrial DNA, etc. Sometimes things are worth the price that you pay because I feel better doing that stuff in general. So if you want to support this podcast, you can do that by going to utkmblog.com/support us and choosing one of the 3 ways you can support this podcast. So I guess that's it for now. Without further ado, here's your podcast.
You're listening to The Warrior's Day. Brought to you by Urban Tactics Krav Maga, turning lambs into lions.
Okay, so as I mentioned, this one is based around a series I did originally in 2017. I reposted it in 2019. I've done some minor changes. Grammatically, again, this was done before I had a good editor, or in between editors, rather. So it's not as clean as I would like it, but, it gets the point across, right? So it loosely discusses very loosely in my journey with mental health issues and music, going as a storytelling narrative through my journey through the military. So I was roughly in the military in IDF between 2019 and 2011, give or take. I served in the Givati Regiment, in the Shaked Battalion Brigade. I'm not sure. I can't remember the translations into Canadian military terms, or American for that matter. It was one of the 5 major infantry regiments, though. And, I moved to another country where I didn't really speak the language, though culturally it's similar to what I'm used to. I discussed that loosely. But I think this podcast, this may be a short one, this may be a long one, I'm not really sure at this point. But it's to do with mental health largely. As I'm recording this, we're still in a minor lockdown in British Columbia, and there are other parts of the world still in major lockdowns, things that I think are absolutely absurd. If you're listening to the stuff I say regularly, I don't think politicians are following science. I don't think scientists are following science. I think you're seeing massive global mob mentality out of fear. And I just think that this is a mistake. But it all comes down to mental health, really, because the mental and physical health of people has been degrading severely because of this. It was predictable. It was called out. And people will call conspiracy theories for stating the obvious. I'm not going to get too much into the whole COVID thing, but I am going to discuss mental health. Now, in particular music, but I think in general, so I allude to it in these posts, that as an individual, I have never really fit in. And that has caused a strain on my mental health. Now, there is a history of depression and anxiety in my family. This is common amongst a lot of Jews, particularly anxiety, although our family specifically for depression. However, growing up, nobody talked about it, nobody knew about it, nobody really acknowledged it. Even to this day, getting anyone in my family to discuss it openly is basically impossible. And I could be completely wrong, but I was probably one of the first people to open up about it. The thing is, growing up, I didn't even know I had depression. I didn't know there was a problem. You just think it's normal. Now, part of it for me is to do with I don't fit in. If you were socially ostracized for whatever reason, of course, you're going to feel negative thoughts inside. And, that's where the music comes in. I use music without knowing it one way or other to enhance my negative mood or enhance my positive mood. And we have a tendency as humans to use music for a variety of mood things. Nowadays, I mostly spend my time listening to podcasts, because the same amount of time I spend listening to the same song over and over again for 3 hours, I can educate myself. Super happy for podcasts. But occasionally when I'm really stressed, I will still throw on music to enhance my mood, usually make me feel a little bit better. So, I'm not an expert on mental health by traditional definitions. I did go to school for psychology. I ended up with an associate's degree. I was in third year, though. I probably had another 2 semesters if I really wanted to finish, but 3 realistically, so another year. I left for mental health reasons, because I was being ostracized once again, because though I'm not a religious conservative, I have conservative-leaning views. And if it's a shocker to many of you that on academic campuses and academia, they detest you if you have such ideas, and they're not willing to have open and discuss. So once again, I found myself as an adult ostracized with mental health issues. Now, the difference between now and then is I have learned and grown and changed that I'm generally quite happy with myself internally. I don't have negative self-talk anymore, though the outside world still often looks at me quite negatively for a variety of reasons. I see things differently. I say things that people don't like. I don't play by the standard social etiquettes of don't say this, say this. I'm not going to be a sheep, as I indicate, and I'm sorry. It's a legitimate thing, because mob mentality is a scientifically proven thing. Bullying has not disappeared in this world. It's just gone on the internet and gone into mob mentality at a greater pace and rate than it ever has. And maybe I'll do another series on that. So you can understand that if you don't have growing up, if you don't have the tools to deal with stuff and you don't have good mentors, I did not have any. I still don't have any good mentors. It's very disappointing, but it is what it is. And as a result, I kind of learned to take care of myself. Now, growing up, I was bullied because I was always a little different. I was chubby, so I got made fun of that. I just was, I would say, intelligent compared to the average person, and I didn't fit in with the school system. So you can see how everything comes collapsing on. And I remember being quite young and being reasonably popular, though I noticed some social ostracizing. And then at a certain point, I found another friend who was also very intelligent, and I ended up spending all my time with them. And when they moved away, I tried to reintegrate back with everyone else, and it just never went good from there. I had realized I may think and see things differently than the average person, and I don't really fit in with them. Then from being chubby, in grade 8 or 9, I got myself on my own. Nobody helped me. Realized I wasn't eating properly. Still not great, but I got rid of things like Kraft Dinner and Coca-Cola every day. I actually didn't end up drinking pop for 5 years straight, I think. I was quite strict on it. And I ended up working out and losing a lot of weight. Still got made fun of. People just found another reason for it. And just throughout, my social skills are not great, right? And then I went to then I started working in the professional fields, and I realized I still don't fit in. Nobody cares that much about me, and I can't communicate with other people. And it was very difficult. And then due to a few things going wrong, I said, fuck it, I'm going to the IDF. And in the IDF, I realized, well, I didn't actually realize, but I was definitely suffering from depression, more social ostracization, isolation, extreme stress due to sleep deprivation. You know, at the end of the army, we were in between training, I actually had gained a lot of weight, right? When I came back, I ended up doing literally nothing for 4 or 5 months. I mean, nothing. But I started working again. I started going out and socializing, and I'll get into it a little later about my major mental breakdown. But let's sort of get back to the music aspect. So I pulled up a few articles. Again, if you listen to me, I know I don't really like doing that much research. I want to just read stuff. But I'm going to read off a few things. So this is the impact of music and imagery on physical performance and arousal. Studies of coordination and endurance. It was published in the Journal of Sports Behavior in March 1992, Volume 15, Issue 1. So it's just a short little synopsis they have here. I'll just read it to you. The impact of music and imagery on physical performance and arousal. Studies, coordination, etc. Lisa Domney, Emile Kwan Mingo, and Christina Lee, University of Newcastle, Australia. Researcher examining the effects of music on behavior is scarce. And this is in 92, by the way. Despite the ubiquity of music in the everyday... I'm just going to... Let me zoom in. I have bad vision now. Everyday lives of people of all cultures, listening to music has been shown to influence emotional state, and its use of preparation strategy is well known in sporting folklore, but has not been evaluated formally. This paper reports on 2 studies of the relationship between music, heart rate, and performance in physical tasks. In the first study, 30 subjects performed a dart-throwing task on 3 occasions without music, after listening to slow classical music and after listening to fast modern music. Performance did not differ across conditions, but heart rate was significantly lowered after listening to either type of music. In the second study, the possible relationship between music and imagery was examined by comparing preparation with imagery alone or imagery plus music for performance in muscular endurance tasks. Task performance improved equally over baseline for both groups. The imagery plus music group showed a significant increase in the heart rate during preparation, but heart rate was not related to task performance. It appears that music may affect arousal, but that for the tasks at least, there is no corresponding effect on behavior. Further systematic research examining a broader range of tasks and types of music may indicate more about the psychological effects of music and their relevance to physical activity. And then it goes on in another language. So this is actually quite interesting. So, you know, this has been 92, but it's still, the links of this, of music and performance, physically are still hard to say. It's a complex topic. You know, I did a pilot study when I was doing university about music and performance. Whole shenanigans around that bullshit nonsense that I ended up going through for that study. But I couldn't find the studies I used at the time, but we were referencing studies that basically indicate, and this, I don't know, this must have been in 2012 through 15 maybe. They indicated, the ones I remember off the top of my head, that BPM can affect a person's performance, but more precisely, do the people like it? So that's why I think a lot of studies go sideways when studying how impact physically performance, because if you're playing music they don't like, they're not going to be as motivated, and it's going to be quite complicated. But what is interesting about this little synopsis is it affects their probably blood pressure and their heart rate. Even if the performance isn't affected, music clearly has effects on the body, right? And in my little pilot study, we didn't have a measurable, noticeable difference, but that's because, again, did the people like the music? Also, our sample groups were really small, and most of the people didn't seem very motivated to be there in the first place because they were doing push-ups and squats. And for most university students who focus too much on their grades and studies and not enough on overall health and wellness, sucked at it. And that's part of the reason I got in trouble, because I basically pointed out that college students are unhealthy and lazy. And it got crazy because people have hurt feelings and can't accept the reality that they're out of shape. But yeah, I found an even better article here from the University of Central Florida, and I'll post these. And this is, I'll read quite a lot of it. Your Brain on Music, a popular class breakdown on how our brains respond to music. Since 2006, two UCF professors, neuroscientist, I'm going to butcher these names, Kiminobu Sagaya, probably Japanese, and world-renowned violinist Ayako Yonetani, I'm going to go with Japanese on these ones, I'm guessing, have been teaching one of the most popular courses in the Burnett Honors College, Music and the Brain. Explores how music impacts the brain functioning and human behavior, including by reducing stress, pain, and symptoms of depression, as well as improving cognitive and motor skills, spatial temporal learning, and neurogenesis, which is the brain's ability to produce neurons. Sugaya and Yonetani teach how people with neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson also respond positively to music. Usually in the late stages, Alzheimer's patients are unresponsive, Sugaya says, but once you put in the headphones that play their favorites, a very key thing, music, their eyes light up. They start moving and sometimes singing. The effect lasts maybe 10 minutes or so even after you turn off the music. This can be seen on an MRI, where lots of different parts of the brain light up. He says, we sat down with the professors who are also husbands and wife and asked them to explain which part of the brain's activated by the music. And I paused there for a second. There's a field of psychology called cognitive psychology. Now, when I was taking it in university, they couldn't have been more fucking boring, because what they would do is they essentially talk about famous cognitive studies and break them down. It's just so boring. But cognitive psychology is probably one of the most important areas, because they actually take theories, hypotheses, and use brain scans and other physical measurable attributes to determine human behavior. So often I think it is not taken seriously because it's, at least as I was taught, it was boring as fuck. Okay, so if you're a cognitive psychology professor, I think it's one of the more important areas of psychology. Learn to fucking teach. Side note. Now, I'd never learned with these individuals, so I'm sure they're much better than the garbage teachers I had on this topic. But a lot of psychology is not real science because they don't actually measure. They use surveys and opinion, and that's why areas like social psychology really pick up, because it makes you feel good and it's easy to learn and you can bullshit. But the reality, they're not very scientific. While cognitive psychology is much more scientific because you can actually measure it. So, for example, if you think you have depression, anxiety, this, guess what? If you get into an MRI, you can actually measure it. Now, if you have the money, go pay for it. It's not going to be cheap. Lots and lots of money. Lots of money. If you live in a country like Canada, they're not going to pay for that, because every person and their mother would want to get this study. And then, then we could actually tailor medical advice for cognition and brain function and mental health for the individual people. But there's a limited amount of MRIs. There's a limited amount of people who know how to do this stuff properly. The system is slow and needs to get it out of its own way to adapt. So if you really want to know what mental state you're in, guess what? They can tell through brain scans nowadays. They know what a depressed brain looks like. They know what anxiety, PTSD brains look like. They can tell. So you could go through a year or two long procedure to figure it out by trial and error with a shitty doctor who really doesn't understand this stuff, or a hacky psychiatrist who never got through their own bullshit and is giving hacky generic advice. Or you could pay the money to get a brain scan and figure out what exactly your problem is, if you in fact think it's a problem. Anyways, I'm going to continue with this. So it's actually, I'm just going to read through the basic part first, and then there's this sort of interactive thing. So, how the brain responds to music. It says click on image and explore, and it goes through the various areas. I'm just going to scroll down for a sec. So, and again, this is on the ucf.edu page. So, what music is best? Turns out, whether it's rock and roll, jazz, hip-hop, or classical, your gray matter prefers the same music you do. It depends on your personal background, Unitai says. For a while, researchers believed that classical music increased brain activity and made its listeners smarter, a phenomenon called the Mozart effect. I'll actually talk about that. It's not necessarily true, says Sagaya and Unitai. In recent studies, they found that people with dementia respond better to music they grew up in listening to. If you play someone's favorite music, different parts of the brain light up. Sagoya explains. That means memories associated with music are emotional memories, which never fade out, even in Alzheimer's patients. And then it lists, music can change your ability to perceive time, tap into your primal fear, reduce seizures, make you a better communicator, make you stronger, boost your immune system, assist you in repairing brain damage, make you smarter. I'll talk about that one later. Evoke memories, help Parkinson patients. Did you know, use it or lose it? We are all born with more neurons than we actually need. Typically, by the age of 8, our brains do a major neuron dump, removing any neurons perceived as unnecessary, which is why it's easier to teach language and music to younger children. If you learn music as a child, your brain becomes designed for music. Side note, 0 to 5 kids they're not able to communicate that they're learning, but they are. And unfortunately, in the Western world at least, we treat our children like children. You should, though. But when it comes to education, they can pick up a lot more than you think. You won't realize it. They won't know until you're older. But because we're obsessed with measuring everything precisely, we don't just let them learn. And you end up not teaching them enough when they're younger. Hence, I think, is a big part of the reason, at least in North America, we have a giant idiocracy of people who didn't learn enough when they were younger because there's too much focus on emotional state, which is important, but the way they go about it is bullshit. They're not actually teaching the important knowledge aspects. We've swayed too much to the emotion. Anyway, oldest instrument. This is back to this thing. According to the National Geographic, a 40,000-year-old vulture bone flute is the world's oldest musical instrument. That's interesting. I did not know that. Hairy cells is talking about the ears. The ear only has 3,500 inner hair cells, compared to the more than 100 million photoreceptors around the eyes. Yet our brains are remarkably adaptable to music. Sing along. In the Sesotho language, the verb for singing and dancing are the same, hobina, as it is assumed the two actions occur together. These are just fun facts, by the way. Seasonal songbirds. Sogea has also conducted neurological studies on the songbirds. His research has found that canaries stop singing every autumn when the brain cells responsible for song generations die. However, the neurons grow back over the winter months, and the birds learn their songs over again in the spring. He takes this as a sign that music may increase neurogenesis in the brain. Interesting idea. So let's just go back. Get started, it says. The frontal lobe. So it's going to go through all the areas of the brain that are specific and discuss how music affects them. So, frontal lobe, what? Used in thinking, decision-making, and planning. Humans actually have a very large frontal lobe, by the way. How? The frontal lobe is the most important to being human. We have big frontal lobes compared to other animals. By listening to music, we can enhance its functions. Temporal lobe processes what we hear. We use language center to appreciate music, which spans both sides of the brain through language, and words are interpreted in the left hemisphere, while music and sounds are interpreted in the right hemisphere. If you didn't know, the brain has two spheres connected, or two, they're not really spheres, they just call them that. Broca's area, what? Enables us to produce speech, super important. How? We use this part of the brain to express music. Yonatai says, playing in an instrument may improve your ability to communicate better. Wernicke's area, comprehend written and spoken language. We use this part of the brain to analyze and enjoy music. Occipital lobe, that's in the back of the head. What processes we see? Professional musics use the occipital cortex, which is the visual cortex, when they listen to music, while layperson like me use the temporal lobe. The Auditory and Language Center, this suggests that musicians might visualize a music score when they are listening to the music. So what they're saying is you can take your visualization practices into your head. And I know some people see sound, synesthesia, where they can see auras or sounds in colors in their visual acuity because their occipital lobe is probably doing something different than other people. It's pretty cool. I know someone who said they have that. It's pretty cool. Cerebellum, it's at the base and the back of the brain. Coordinates movement and stores physical memory. An Alzheimer's patient, even if he doesn't recognize his wife, could still play a piano if he learned it when he was young because playing it has become muscle memory. Those memories in the cerebellum never fade out. So the more you practice when you're younger, the more likely you are to keep it. Just realized I was speaking to a weird angle into the microphone. Nucleus accumbens. What? Seeks pleasure and reward is sort of in the middle internal areas of the brain. A big role in addiction as it releases the neurotransmitter dopamine. How? Music can be a drug and a very addictive drug because it's also acting on the same part of the brain as illegal drugs. Music increases dopamine in the nucleus accumbens, similar to cocaine. Amygdala processes and triggers emotion. Music can control your fear and make it ready to fight and increase your pleasure. When you feel shivers go down your spine, the amygdala is activated. Some people don't get that response. I'll talk about it later. Hippocampus, sort of mid-lower area, smaller area of the brain, produces and retrieves memories, regulates emotions, responses, and helps us navigate. Consider the central processing unit of the brain. It's one of the first regions of the brain to be affected by Alzheimer's disease, leading to confusion and memory loss. How? Music may increase neurogenesis. Neurogenesis, by the way, just means regrowth of neurons in the hippocampus, allowing production of the new neurons and improving memory. Unatani. I keep saying it a Hebrew way. Hypothalamus. What? Maintains the body status quo, linking the endocrine and nervous systems, and produces and releases essential hormones and chemicals that regulate thirst, appetite, sleep, mood, heart rate. It's like your subconscious body functions, essentially. If you plan on playing Mozart, for example, heart rate and blood pressure are reduced. Corpus callosum. It enables the left and right hemispheres to communicate, allowing for coordinated body movements as well. So basically connects the two sides of the brain. How? As a musician, you want to have the right hand side and the left hand side of the brain coordinating so they talk to each other. This allows pianists, for example, to translate notes on a sheet to the keys their fingers hit to produce music. And putamen processes rhythm and regulates body movement and coordination. Music can increase dopamine in this area, and music increases our response to rhythm. By doing this, music temporarily stops the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Rhythmic music, for example, has been used to help Parkinson's patients function, such as getting up and down, even walking, because Parkinson's patients need assistance in moving, and music can help them, kind of like a cane. Unfortunately, after our music stops, the pathology returns. It's pretty interesting, and they did it quite graphically, so I'll post the link about this. And it just gives you a basic idea of areas of the brain, so you can learn some basic biology of the brain, and you can understand how the music affects each area. Just a thing, it is a myth that we only use 10% of brain. It's more to do with that certain areas of the brain activate at certain times, so at any one given time, we may not be maximizing the brain's efficiency all at once, because the brain just doesn't operate like that. Again, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I am not the expert on that. Right? So it's sort of a couple of introductory about a little bit of my mental health history, also music and the brain itself, and how you can use it as a tool. Again, you can use it for the positive and the negative. So let's take a look at this first post of the series that inspired this podcast episode. Music, a Tool to Change, Part 1. Music, a Tool to Change Mood, a Personal History, Part 1. Music is something that has been in the history of man for as long as most can tell. It is sound, vibration, the transfer of energy that creates soothing or intense emotional reactions. Some of us are even lucky enough to get goosebumps when we hear music, myself included. Music is ingrained in most cultures, in one form or another, and can be used for the most beautiful intentions or used to manipulate you into buying something you wouldn't otherwise have done. In 1991, a French researcher, Dr. Alfred A. Tomatis, wrote about something he called the Mozart effect in his book, Pourquoi Mozart? Tomatis did research into auditory effects of music to help with various mental ailments. In a follow-up study published in Nature in 1993, Rauscher et al. Showed using the Mozart effect that listening to particular music could definitely help with spatial reasoning and enhance IQ scores. In short, something we have always known intuitively, that music enhances mood, was shown by the Mozart effect and numerous other studies that music can improve performance and mood both for good and or bad. Now that the obvious is out of the way, let's get into my personal history with music and how two artists in particular help inspire me and get me through some tough times. When I was younger at home, my parents used to put on things like classical music, opera, and some form of news radio. I used to fall asleep to things like Enya, Sarah Brightman, Andrea Botticelli, and Peter and the Wolf as narrated by Captain Jean-Luc Picard himself. Patrick Stewart. I often forget that when I was younger, I was exposed to such things as it was so long ago. But once in a while, when I take the time to think back, I remember I do like such music. Outside of that, however, music was not a part of my life as my family in general is not of the musical variety. As I grew older in elementary school, for some reason or another, I lost interest in music completely. I didn't understand my peers' obsession with the top 10 hits on the local radio station. Among other things, this was the beginning of the realization that I am not really like other people. Perhaps I didn't understand why they all just blindly liked the same thing, like sheep, and I rejected music because though I didn't know it yet, I always am and always have been a wolf. Because of this, at the time, I never used music for the good or for the bad. Enter high school, and the standard years of angst. I don't recall exactly how or why I started listening to it, but I listened to angrier music like Slipknot, D12, or other such things. At the time, I used to enhance my anger, my hate, and the feelings of loneliness and despair as I slipped closer to the dark side. Though I had friends, I certainly never fit in, and looking back, I feel like they only kept me around out of boredom or to have another person for their games. Post-army, learning what real brotherhood and friendship were like, I realized none of them were ever really my friends. It's a shame I didn't know that at the time, for perhaps I would have found different friends and had happier times. Later in high school, I found a different group of friends, those who were also social outcasts, but not socially inept. Though through them I found things like classic rock, the Beatles, Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, and at the time, my favorite, Led Zeppelin. Though not any happier with myself or any less angry, at least I found music that would no longer enhance such emotions, but instead would foster a more open view of the world around me. As time passed, happiness, finally free of my prison of the school system, a place not for people like myself who don't fit the mold in any way, shape, or form, and someone completely to this day unwilling to be a sheep and conform to the lies and laziness of the powers that be. It was at this time I started branching out into alternative music and EDM and other similar genres. On January 18, 2006, only a few months free, while watching the late night show, I saw a performance. Matisyahu live on Letterman. Yes, you guessed it, Matisyahu. If you had read my stories on the Camp My Way experience, you would have noticed several of his songs. Though Matisyahu has evolved from his previous personal as a Hasidic Jew singing reggae, his music has always spoken to me. Though I am not in any way religious man in any way, I think Matisyahu's lyrics and music do a beautiful job at capturing what it means to be human. Whether I knew it or not, like the butterfly effect, Changing the channel on this night and at this time would set things in motion for things to come and lay the path for my future life. Okay, so do you remember what kind of music you listened to when you were younger? Or why? Do you just listen to what other people listen to, or do you actually enjoy it? Something to consider because social pressures kick in there. So I linked, said something about goosebumps in that one, talk to the mic. And I'm going to read an article, a mentalfloss.com article. Why does music give you the chills? This is from August 2nd, 2016 by Lucas Riley. Really? Man. When your playlist strikes all the right chords, your body can go into a physiological joyride. Your heart rate increases, your pupils dilate, your body temperature rises, blood redirects to your legs, your cerebellum mission control for your body movement because you're more active. Your brain flushes with dopamine and a tingly chill whisks down your back. About 50% of people get the chills when listening to music. I am one of them, as I said. Research shows that's because music stimulates an ancient reward pathway in the brain, encouraging dopamine to flood to the striatum, a part of the forebrain activated by addiction, reward, motivation. Music, it seems, may affect our brains the same way that sex, gambling, potato chips do. Strangely, those dopamine levels can peak several seconds before the song's special moment. That's because your brain is a good listener. It's constantly predicting what's going to happen. Evolutionary speaking, it's a handy habit to have. Making good predictions is essential for survival. But music is tricky. It can be unpredictable, teasing our brains and keeping those dopamine triggers guessing. And that's where the chills may come in, because when you finally hear the long-awaited chord, the striatum sighs with dopamine-soaked satisfaction, and bam, you get the chills. The greater the build-up, the greater the chills. Gray areas. But there is competing theories. Neuroscientist, I'm going to butcher this one, Jack, probably Yak, Jaak, Panksepp, for example, discovered the sad music triggers chills more often than happy music. He argues that melancholy tune activates an ancient chill-inducing mechanism, a distress response our ancestors felt when separated from the family. When a ballad makes us feel nostalgic or wistful, the evolutionary design kicks into gear. What's interesting about Panksepp's theory, though, is that chills don't sadden most people. The experience is overwhelmingly positive. Recent research shows that sad music actually evokes positive emotions. Sadness experienced through the art is more pleasant than the sadness you experience from a bad day at the office. And this may hint at another theory. The amygdala, which processes your emotions, responds uniquely to music. A somber tune may activate a fear response in the amygdala, making your hair stand on end. When that happens, your brain quickly reviews whether there is any real danger, and when it realizes there is nothing to worry about, that fear response becomes positive. The fear subsides, but the chills remain. Anything goes. You can feel chills from any genre, whether it's from Mozart, Madonna, tango, or techno. It's the structure, not the style, that counts. Goosebumps more often occur when something unexpected happens, a new instrument enters, the form shifts, the volume suddenly dims. It's all about the element of surprise. Well, maybe. The most powerful chills may occur when you know what's coming next, when expectations are being met. The nucleus accumbens becomes more active. This ties back to the dopamine-inducing guessing game our brain likes to play. As a result, being familiar can enhance thrill of the chills. Perhaps why 90% of musicians report feeling the chills. Your personality matters too. Scientists at UNC Greensboro found that people who are more open to new experiences are more likely to feel a quiver down their spine, possibly because open individuals are more likely to play instruments. Meanwhile, research in Germany found that people who felt chills were less likely to be thrill seekers, but were more reward driven. Interesting. I could say a lot about that. So I thought this was interesting. If I get the chills, I'm an open person. People say I'm not, but it's like, yeah, I am. I just want to be convinced. Anyways, enough about me, right? So if you can see, it plays a lot on the dopamine of the body and ties into the similar areas of the brain as does addiction, which probably explains why people get addicted to songs, because they're actually getting a dopamine rush, which is what often we get when we get addicted to things. We get a dopamine rush to our body, and our body feels good, and therefore we feel good. So even it was, as mentioning, even negative songs give you that sense of dopamine. Now, Before I move on, let's just talk about what is dopamine. So I just pulled up an article from WebMD. Every doctor has hated the site. Remember when it first came out, all the doctors were like, no, don't go to that. Anyways, what is dopamine? Dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter your body makes, and your nervous system uses it to send messages between nerve cells. That's why it's sometimes called a chemical messenger. Dopamine plays a role in how we feel pleasure. It's a big part of our unique human ability to think and plan. It helps us strive, focus, and find things interesting. Your body spreads along the 4 major pathways in the brain. Like most other systems in the body, you don't notice it, or maybe even don't know about it until there's a problem. Too much or too little can lead to a vast range of health issues. Some are serious, like Parkinson's disease. Others are much less dire. Dopamine basics. It's made through the brain. It's made in the brain through a 2-step process. First, it changes the amino acid tyrosine to a substance called dopa, and then into dopamine. It affects many parts of your behavior and physical functions, such as learning, motivation, heart rate, blood vessel function, kidney function, lactation, sleep, mood, attention, control, nausea, and vomiting, pain processing, movement. Role in mental health. It's hard to pinpoint a single cause of most mental health disorders and challenges, but they're often linked to too much or too little dopamine in different parts of the brain, such as schizophrenia. Decades ago, researchers believed the symptom stemmed from hyperactive dopamine system. Now we know that some are due to too much of the chemical in certain parts of the brain. This includes hallucinogens and delusions. A lack of it in other parts can cause different signs, such as a lack of motivation and desire. Just so you know, people with depression have fucked up dopamine. I am definitely one of those. ADHD. No one knows for sure what causes it. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Some research show it may be due to a shortage of dopamine. The problem may be due to your genes, though. ADHD drugs, Ritalin, work by boosting dopamine. Drug misuse and addiction. Drugs such as cocaine can cause a big, fast increase in dopamine in your brain that satisfies your natural reward system in a big way. But repeated drug use also raises the threshold for this kind of pleasure. This means you need to take more to get the same high. Meanwhile, drugs make your body less able to produce dopamine naturally. This leads to emotional lows when you're sober. Dopamine in other diseases. It also plays a role in diseases that aren't related to mental health. One of these is Parkinson's disease, another obesity, which is America's Medical Association classified as a disease in 2013. Side note, they seem to ignore it as a comorbidity factor for COVID. Yet in 2013, it was considered a disease. Politics. Get over yourself. You need to lose weight. Anyways, back to the article. Parkinson's disease. Dopamine enables neurons in your brain to communicate and control movement. In Parkinson's, one type of neuron steadily degenerates. It doesn't have a signal to send anyone, so your body makes less dopamine. The chemical imbalances causes physical symptoms. These include tremors, stiffness, slowness, spontaneous mood, etc. Obesity. Most of the time, if you take more calories in than you burn, you'll gain weight. So why can't obese people simply eat less and slim down? The answer isn't that simple. Some people, and this is me saying some people, stop saying it's everyone, they may face obstacles that they don't know. They could have problems with their natural reward system. This can affect the amount of food they eat before to feel satisfied. Imagining studies suggested that in people with this condition, the body may not release enough dopamine and others feel-good hormones, serotonin. Dopamine can save lives. The chemical usually plays a secondary role in the body, and certain medical situations, it's literally a lifesaver. Doctors prescribe dopamine, low blood pressure, poor cardiac output, poor blood flow, some cases septic shock, and there's a whole list of other stuff. So you can see that dopamine is extremely important. And, more specific to depression, serotonin, SSRIs or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So, the two things, dopamine and serotonin, affect your mood dramatically. Imagine if we actually practiced more cognitive medicine, cognitive psychology, did MRIs on people and checked the state of their brain to see if the chemical balances are right, and we'd be able to fix these properly rather than just taking random pills and hoping it works and giving the giant pharmaceutical companies money they don't actually need because we might only need a specific drug that's actually really cheap to get. So obviously dopamine factors in on the reward centers. This is why music can be an addiction. It can feed addiction, and it can also enhance your mood or enhance. So like even if you're depressed, you listen to sad songs, and it could actually be, this is me saying here, that you're getting addicted to the dopamine rush of the song associated with it. And then what that happens is your brain misidentifies the addiction. It gets addicted to that feeling, and it actually keeps you in the mood. So you keep yourself in a negative mood, and you keep listening to music, because the music that keeps you in the negative mood is actually releasing dopamine, and you're actually in a vicious cycle. And it's very common for people who are depressed or feeling anxious to listen to sad music. Now, while the studies in that article I was reading earlier do suggest that it's actually not a negative, the reality is it kind of can be, because though from a cognitive psychology perspective, a biological perspective, it's causing an addiction to that music, but that music is making you sad and keeping you in that sad state. And so you're actually connecting the dots somehow, and you become addicted to that sad state. And what you're really seeking out is the dopamine release as caused by the music, which causes an addiction. And you see it's a vicious cycle now. So if you're upset or depressed, listening to sad music indefinitely or long term is actually causing you to stay sad and depressed in a roundabout way. So you do have to be careful. Angsty teens, I was one of them. I'll talk about it, I think in the next podcast, the next blog post thing, is you just choose to enhance your negative mood by doing it. Other people who say, oh, you need a release, but it's fine if it's for like a day. But if you find yourself doing it indefinitely, you may have an addiction issue with the music relating to it, and you're causing yourself to stay in an undesirable mood rather than getting out of it. So music can dramatically affect, based on a lot of research, your mood, your heart rate, etc. But the tools we use to heal ourselves can also create negative behavioral patterns. If it's releasing dopamine or serotonin, and we get addicted to it, and then we keep reinforcing the mood with the dopamine, you're actually making things worse, right? So it's something to really consider. Now, I mentioned the Mozart effect, so let's look up what the Mozart effect is. Now, I'm just pulling off of Wikipedia. So the Mozart effect refers to the theory that listening to music of Mozart may temporarily boost scores on one IQ test. Popular science versions of the theory make the claim that listening to Mozart makes you smarter, or that early childhood classical music has beneficial effects on mental development. So that's what the Mozart effect is essentially. Now, music has often been talked about in enhancing the brain or intelligence, and it could. The thing is with science is often us humans are not very sophisticated. You see it going on now with COVID, but whatever. Is that we focus, science in itself wants to isolate, and in isolating specific things, you don't actually consider confounding variables because you're not supposed to. But those confounding variables can make or break the theory. And the thing is that there's a lot of people who have high IQ or high intelligence, high EQ, grew up in homes that were able to provide them proper education from the start. So they had more stable upbringing, financially more stable upbringing. They have better education from the start. So it's really hard to pinpoint if music itself enhances intelligence or simply education at a lower age. And of course, those who are more educated, due to just the history of education, often are drawn to classical music. And if you're in the same spheres of educated social elites or wealthy, where you learn piano and classical and this, you're going to be drawn to it more because of social expectations. So I found an interesting article called on the association between musical training, intelligence, and executive functions in adulthood. Now, is this related to depression? No, but it can be. Now, I'm going to read this article because I think it's fascinating, the music's relation to intelligence. But the thing is intelligence can affect your depression. I've read countless articles about intelligent people are more likely to have depression and anxiety. Perhaps it's because they see more of the world and get anxious about it in a broader sense, from theory to practical. Or perhaps it's because having a higher IQ is rarer than having a lower IQ. If you consider the bell curve model, if most people are in the 80% middle, if you're in the top 10%, you're going to struggle relating to people in that middle. And it's just the way it is. So you have harder time interpersonally, can't relate to people as easily, and thus it causes depression. So I thought I would discuss, or depression, anxiety, I thought I would discuss this article and just connecting some concepts of music and intelligence, because though the theme of this the theme of this episode is music and depression, I think it's good to talk about music and its effects on the brain in general. So let me read through this article. Again, I will post the link in the actual episode notes. I should note I'm not going to read it all of it. And this is Frontiers in Psychology, originally posted on July 2019, July 30th. Antonio Criscullo, Leonardo Bonetti, Tempo Saracamo, Marina Kliuchko, and Elvira Bratko read this. So I'm not going to read all of it, but I'll read some of it. So, converging evidence has demonstrated that musical training in association with improved perceptual and cognitive skills, including executive functions and general intelligence, particularly in childhood. In contrast, in adults, the relationship between cognitive performance and musicianship is less clear and seems to be modulated by a number of background factors, such as personality and socioeconomic status. Aiming to shed new light on this topic, we administered the Wechsler's Adult Intelligence Scale 3 and the Wechsler's Memory Scale 3 and the Stroop Test to 101 Finnish healthy, 101 Finnish healthy adults. So this is obviously from Finland. That's why I can't pronounce the names. According to their musical expertise. Now, pause. Finland has a higher level of educated adults. They have a very high education level. A lot of the Nordic countries do. So just their education's amazing over there. So back to it. After being matched for socioeconomic status, personality traits, and other demographic variables, adult musicians exhibited higher cognitive performance than non-musicians in all mentioned measures. Right? So they did account for socioeconomic status and educational exposure. So it's really important that they did that because they're acknowledging it as a factor. So moreover, linear regression models show significant positive relationships between executive functions, working memory, and attention, and the duration of musical practice, even after controlling for intelligence and background variables, such personality traits. Hence, our study offers further support for the association between cognitive abilities and musical training, even in adulthood. Pause. Music is heavily linked to mathematical and logical abilities, so it makes sense that if you train your brain in these, your brain is better at higher level reasoning. So, back to it. Highlights. Musicians show higher general intelligence, verbal intelligence, working memory, and attention skills than non-musicians. Amateurs scores in between. Significant positive correlations between years of musical playing and cognitive abilities support the hypothesis that long-term musical practice is associated with intelligent and executive functions. Pause. Imagine if I'd done music from a young age. Oh well. Introduction. Musical training relies on executive functions. Musical training is a multisensory experience engaging in multiple cognitive functions and underlying neural networks. Indeed, reading, listening, understanding, and performing polyphonic music requires simultaneously processing of sounds and rhythms, higher order perceptual processing, and fine sensory motor coordination. Munit et al. 2002. Long-term musical training. Sorry, this is very academic, so it's going to be a little tough for me to read. Long-term musical training engages and trains all the functions on a daily basis, and as a result, musicians seem to improve not only musical-related ability, but also domain general skills, so stuff kind of those brain areas use that are similar. Hence, musicians show increased auditory perception and production abilities, such as enhanced capacity to detect deviations in complex regularities and tone patterns. Whole bunch of citations there, as well as fine motor movement. Pause. What that could translate to is you have better social skills, hypothetically, is if you're not on the spectrum of autism, because you can read, you can hear better the changes in tones of people's voices, so you can read emotions better. Something I suck at. Maybe I should have learned music better. Anyways, continuing. Besides improving listening and sensory motor abilities closely linked to the musical practices, citation. I'm not gonna read the citations. They're in the link. I'll give it to you. There is also evidence in favor of the far transfer effect to non-musical functions. In literature, far transfer effect relates to the influence of musical training on general mathematical and nonverbal abilities. Among these, working memory refers to the ability to retrieve, monitor, analyze, integrate, chunk, and recall within a short time span, both auditory and non-auditory information. I'm sorry, I'm just skipping through a lot of the citations. For reviews, see these following people. In music processing, working memory integrates sounds offense recollects information from a memory system, links sounds to meaning and to memories, and supports the generation of emotional reactions. Hence emotional stability, right? Along with cognitive flexibility, response inhibition, and interference control, working memory is considered one of the fundamental executive functions, higher levels for humans, makes us smarter than other animals. Executive functions designate a set of abilities related to updating and manipulating relevant information, inhibiting automatic responses, shifting attention and mental tasks, planning, reasoning, and decision-making. Improvements in executive functions and cognitive flexibility by musical training have been observed in Finnish school-age children, and these improvements positively correlated to enhanced neural sound discrimination. Now, music training when I was growing up sucked. You do band, and the one teacher that did guitar taught guitar, so I had to learn trumpet, and I hated it because my sister learned trumpet, so I had to learn trumpet because they're really expensive. Anyways, figure out what musical instrument your child likes and get them to learn that. Personally, I'm a fan of violin and piano, but people hate the violin. Anyways, back to this article. Well, I should say people hate the violin of people learning because it sounds horrible, but if you're amazing at it, it sounds beautiful. Anyways, effects of musical training on general intelligence. Previous evidence suggests that long-term engagement in musical activities modulates not only executive functions, but also general intelligence. In psychological science, it has been defined as several ways, as assessed using a variety of behavioral tests. Described it as, Gottfriedson described it as a very general mental capability that involves the ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly, and form experiences. General intelligence seems to rely on similar neurological substrates of working memory, comprising a network of prefrontal and subcortical regions, along with the interior cingulate, parietal, and premotor regions. For similarities at both functions and anatomical levels, Salthouse and Pink suggested that working memory is closely related to general they're using abbreviations here. General intelligence. Moreover, the benefits of transfer effects of music training extends to the domain of general intelligence and its quantitative measures, namely intelligence quotient, IQ. For example, musically trained children show high IQ as compared to non-trained children. Now, I'll put a pause on that. A lot of people don't like IQ. Bottom line, there is a noticeable difference in intelligence level. Everyone should have met someone way smarter than them, and everyone should have met someone way not smarter than them. It's just a reality. The IQ test is not a perfect measure for intelligence, but it's a baseline. If you're upset that you don't score as high as you want to, it's called ego. Okay? The more intelligent people on this planet may be more capable of fixing things, but they may also have worse social skills because, as I mentioned, intelligent people often struggle to fit in with the majority, and we are social creatures, and therefore it causes not always good decisions with regards to others. They make purely data-driven decisions, which I am against, and they screw over the majority of people. But see, high IQ and music on high IQ tend to generally have higher rates of anxiety. This is not in this article. I'm just sort of connecting some dots here. So let's go back to this article. Nature or nurture. Finding in favor of the link between musical training and cognitive functions led to the notorious debate of nature versus nurture. Are the observed differences in cognitive abilities only associated with pre-existing neurocognitive differences which predispose people to engage in musical activities, or is the cognitive training promoted by musical activities able to influence cognitive abilities, nurture? On the side of numerous experimental studies have shown the link between musical training and cognitive development. For example, in Schellenberg 2004, IQ of a sample of 144 6-year-old children were assessed before and after 1 year of music or drama classes by Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children 3rd edition. The authors demonstrated that despite no difference in the pre-test for the WISC scores, there were greater improvements in WISC scores for children of musical groups as compared to the control groups, along with improvements in some of its subscales, such as verbal comprehension and perceptual organization indices. Similarly, in Schellenberg 2011, obviously this individual does a lot of research on this, 106 children aged 9 to 12, half musically trained and half musically not, so a control group, were tested with the Wechsler abbreviated scale of intelligence Trained children showed higher IQ scores than their untrained counterpart. Lastly, beyond IQ assessed with psychological tests, music training in childhood is associated with positive academic achievement and improvement for language-related ability. Pause. So you can also think that IQ tests are designed by people who are in the academic circles and therefore they're looking to measure certain things. That is a fair criticism of IQ tests, but they're still a good measure of a baseline of general intelligence and education. So people who are not educated tend to not like it, and people who support these people tend to not like it. So continuing. Together, these findings highlight and associate between musical training and general cognitive ability in childhood. However, when taking in consideration background variables other than musical training, some authors have shown the pre-existing differences in cognitive abilities, which means you're born with what you got, and some people have different skill sets from the get-go. So, continuing. Together with the differences in children and their parents, personality traits may contribute in the choice of engaging in musical training and in the duration of such training. What that means is, what's your parents' situation like? What's your home life like? If you have a garbage one, training is going to be absent. Therefore, if you have a good home life, you're more likely to be exposed to musical and educational training. I don't have kids yet. I plan on teaching them and learning with them because I don't have it. So I'm going to use it as an opportunity to learn for myself, both several languages, math that I'm missing, and language. I'm not motivated now with a child. I will be. So, yay. I came up with a good home, just to put a point, but my parents were not very engaged in the actual learning of what I was learning. So anyways. Where was I? Probably. In turn, this may ultimately account for differences in cognitive performances in adulthood. Furthermore, Bonetta and Costa 2017 showed association between fluid intelligence and music task chain children aged 4 to 6 years old with no previous musical training, suggesting a possible innate connection between some musical skills and intelligence that could potentially lead to higher probability engaging in musical studies for children with higher IQ, etc. So again, I really think there is definitely a measurable effect on your brain in intelligent music, but it may actually have to do a lot of it to do with your educational upbringing and home situation. But the one thing for sure is it seems like music will in fact train your brain how to see patterns, logic, reason, and mathematical capabilities because it becomes sort of a subconscious normality. Right, and then it goes into their current study, exactly what they're looking into in the tests. I won't bore you with that because it's already quite dense, etc. It's quite long. But I'll go to the results. So let's take a look. Results. Musician, amateurs, and non-musicians. As compared to amateurs, musicians had spent more years and hours practicing an instrument. Musical background information on amateurs and musical is provided in their table, along with mean abbreviation for something, etc. Despite the absence of differences in background variables, so they tried to link everyone up to similar backgrounds, home life, etc. Musicians perform better in all cognitive tests as compared to the other groups, as shown in their graphs, etc. It goes through some mathematical, statistical stuff. Well, basically that means if all things are absolutely equal, there is a strong correlation to music and higher intelligence. So it goes through some other stuff. I won't read through most of the rest of the stuff, but this is really interesting, well-informed, well-done study, in-depth, lots of citations. This is what good studies look like. So the link is in the actual blog post. You can follow it up. But I think at this point you should see that music can affect your mood through dopamine and potentially serotonin. It can affect your mental state, positive or negative. It can affect your intelligence, positive or negative. Of course, the type of music you affect. There was studies done, I'm doing this off the top of my head, that Mozart and classical music were the number one, then modern rock like Led Zeppelin, etc., and then it just sort of went down for that. So is it that the intelligence level chooses the music or the socioeconomic environment chooses the music? It's hard to say. But one thing's for sure, it seems that all things equal, classical music and more mathematically based music that is rhythmic and teaches you scales and all that sort of stuff probably has a higher level of ability to affect your intelligence. So a little bit back to the post now. So this is post 2, and where I talk about the decision of how music affected my decision to go to Israel and a little bit about that. Music, a tool to change mood, a personal history, part 2. It's actually because of Matisyahu and his music that helped convince me at the right time to drop everything, move to Israel, and join the IDF. Specifically 2 songs, Jerusalem and Warrior, which also happen to be 2 of his earlier songs. But with all music, words alone cannot do them justice, so here are the songs, assuming they don't get pulled. Click on video. At one point, I considered getting the lyrics, Jerusalem, if I forget you, let my right hand forget what it's supposed to do, tattooed on me, in Hebrew, as it is a biblical verse. I'm glad the tattoo artist convinced me out of it, as it was a bit too religious for my liking now. Instead, I got the Hebrew word for life tattooed on me to symbolize that I chose life, which I put in the center of my black and white Star of David. It not only expressed my identity, as I am a proud Jew, even if I have great disdain for religion, but also that the universe demands unity of everything, male and female, right and wrong, and good and evil, tattooed on me in Hebrew, as it is a biblical verse. However, the second verse of Jerusalem in particular spoke to me, which goes the following. Rebuild the temple and the crown of glory, years gone by about 60, burn in the oven in the century, and the gas tried to choke, but it couldn't choke me. I will not lie down, I will not fall asleep. They come overseas, yes, they're trying to be free. Erase the demons out of our memory, change your name and your identity. Afraid of the truth and our dark history, why is everybody always chasing we? Cut off the roots of your family tree, don't you know that's not the way to be? In reference to the Holocaust and how history has attempted to destroy the Jews as a people, uproot us and destroy our lineage. Did I mention I am a proud Jew? I decided to accept my identity as a Jew, not because I care about the Torah, not because I am religious, not because I like the holidays, but because of history. In the end, it does not matter what I think, whether I accept myself as a cultural Jew, a religious Jew, or a genetic Jew. Those around me will always see me as a Jew. Hitler determined that if you had 2 grandparents that were Jewish, even if you weren't a practicing Jew, you would be considered a Jew, and thus subject to the atrocities that were committed under his orders. This was even used in the construction of Israel's right to return laws. Despite claims that there is no anti-Semitism in the world, it is false narrative. Even when there are mass protests, like the misguided Love Trumps hate rallies, many of those who claim to operate in the name of love still hate Jews. For anti-Semitism is real and as strong as ever. As such, no matter what I think, those who would hate Jews will always see me as one, no matter what I think. This song, as well as the hate of others irony, made me realize I must accept who I am and be proud of my heritage, even if I don't plan to continue the Jewish practices. This song helps me solidify who I am as a person. It helped me know who I am and accept it. It helped me understand the meaning of the term never again when referring to the Jewish people, in particular with the second verse. And come 2008-2009, when I decided to move to Israel and join the IDF, this was one of the reasons I convinced myself to go. The second of Matisyahu's 2 songs that helped me decide to go to Israel was Warrior. Click on video. With this song, the line in the chorus, "You're a warrior fighting for your soul," spoke to me. For I am a warrior fighting for my soul, lost and unhappy, looking for purpose. For I am the lion, the wolf, and the fox, and I will fight for me because no one else will. Though I add the animal analogy as I write this, the 3 animals which I think embodied UTKM, the rest was true at the time. I decided, yes, I am a warrior. I don't care if others look down at me, berate me, hate me, or deny my talents and potential. I will do it for me. I even thought of my grandfather, who was a proud veteran of the Canadian Forces and proud supporter of Israel. Outside of my Israeli cousins, I would be the only of his children or grandchildren in North America closer to him that would continue the military tradition. I know he would have been proud of me, though unfortunately he passed before my service. The memory of him and his dedication, along with the song and what it means to be a warrior, further pushed my decision to join the military. Okay, so that's sort of like the or early army stuff, pre-army, and then the third post skips right into like near the later of the army thing. But I will say something about music and performance, going back to it. People like to put music they like when they train. And we used to music in our fitness classes, and to hype us up. And now, like Peloton, they did get sued for copyright infringement, but they use it to enhance the mood and beat and get people going. And then, now imagine being in the military. You got to go 40 kilometers plus in a day or a night or a week or whatever. I had some weeks where we went 150, 200 kilometers throughout the entire week with all our gear on foot. And I was in Grivati, so at the time the Beret March was 40 kilometers. You do that from sundown to sunrise, basically. You have to do it in absolute silence other than footsteps and the demons of your own thought. So we often use music to escape the pain of the exercise or the pain. So imagine having to go all night, tired and hungry and sweaty, with nothing but silence. And it's actually a tool that I use in Krav Maga sometimes. I don't always put music on. A lot of times it's quiet. And I want people to focus on the training while thinking about their head, because, what's going on in your head. If you don't like being alone with your own thoughts, you have to work on that. We often use music to mask our thoughts going through when we're doing something difficult. Makes sense. So I want to address something I just mentioned in that article, The Law of Return. This is from Wikipedia. The Law of Return, Section 1 of the Law of Return declares every Jew has the right to come to this country as an Ole, an immigrant. In the Law of Return, the State of Israel gives the effect to the Zionist movement credo, which is called for the establishment of Israel, a Jewish state, blah, blah, blah. In 1970, the right of entry and settlement was extended to people with Jewish grandparents and a person who was married to a Jew, basically because of the way Hitler was. So there's more to that, and people make it controversial. They don't need to make it controversial, grow up. But just I wanted to explain what that actually was. Right, and of course, in that I talk about Matisyahu's song about relating to Jewish history and the falls of the temple, and it relates to the Holocaust and about identity. So in this song, I related to my Jewish identity. So this thing, who are you? What are you? Who am I? Is a common problem, especially if you grow up in a multicultural place. I'm in Vancouver, Metro Vancouver. There's not that many Jews. Strong Jewish identity is heavily dependent on, did you go to Jewish day school and etc.? Were you heavy in the Jewish community, as opposed to a place like Toronto or New York, where it's very easy to have a big Jewish identity. In Metro Vancouver, for example, there's a lot of Asians, and often you get Asian kids of a variety of Asian backgrounds who grew up here, are very, quote, whitewashed, but their parents are first generation, like very ethnically what they were, and there's a disconnect because the children want to fit in with their parents and they want to fit in with society. And I noticed a trend about, identity is, for mental health, is a lot of my friends growing up struggled. Who am I? Do I be more white or Western, or do I go more culturally Asian? And people often pick, they just go full-on ham Westernized or full-on ham Asian. And it's very difficult to play that straddle, that in between. So these songs I'm mentioning, they gave me a lot to think about when I was younger, and my mental health, and my identity. Right, nowadays, I'm a Jew, and if it comes up in topic, I talk about it. But I identify myself as me. I don't identify myself as the group. Just like with depression, a lot of people make the mistake with depression and anxiety, where they identify their persona with the disease or ailment. And it's something that I was taught in school not to do. And yet I see people with anxiety and depression and PTSD running around saying, I have PTSD, I have anxiety, I have depression. And what that actually does is you're identifying your entire persona, the story you're telling yourself is that thing. And instead of being, I am John, you say, I am John with depression. And you reinforce that. Right. I'm not going to get too much into the power of words, because a lot of that I think is a lot of silliness. But if you're using mood to enhance your depressed state, and you're telling people, you're introducing people as, I'm John, I have depression. I've met people like this. They always talking about their depression, always talking about their PTSD, always talking about their anxiety. They constantly talk about it as their thing. Acknowledge it, grow, learn to go. And if you're using your music to enhance these things, you're not growing. It's super important to know your identity, whether it be cultural or mentally. But if you're using the music to enhance a negative view of yourself and causing your identity to be something you're not, or something you don't want to be, rather, it's very problematic, right? If you have depression, okay, I had depression. Largely, I don't anymore. I have COVID spiked it up a couple times in the day, just when basically, fuck you, governments, for your delusional approach to everything. Anyways, you need to be careful how you use your tools to deal with your mental state. So if you feel you're depressing, you should have songs that lift you out of it. It's much more beneficial because you can get into a better mental state. And for the love of God, don't identify yourself with a negative thing, whether it be depression, anxiety, PTSD. And it is negative if it keeps making your worldview negative and you're always depressed and anxious. That is negative for you. Having it is not inherently a negative thing because life is what it is, but fixating and linking to that. So if you're using music negatively to create that addictive cycle of the mood correlated with the music which will release dopamine or serotonin, you're not doing it right? And if you're struggling with your identity, in this case, I use the music of Matisyahu, heavily Jewish focused, to have stronger identity. But I also listen to music of all sorts of stuff. To be honest, I can't stand Mizrahi music, which is sort of the Middle Eastern Israeli music, more Arab influenced, if you will. It just sounds like it's like whiny boy bands and high-pitched music. I just drove me nuts. I didn't find it enjoyable at all, but a lot of Israelis love it. So how do you use music to enhance your mood? So I'm going to read an article I found from Hopkins Medicine. If you didn't know, James, Johns Hopkins University is one of the premier medical hospitals in America, if not the world, and they do a lot of awesome studies and a variety of things, and they tend to still drive medical research home really well, while as a lot of other places are not so progressive. So this is an article on Keep Your Brain Young with Music from the Johns Hopkins Medical School, and this is a way to use an example of how to use music as a positive thing for your brain rather than a negative thing, keeping vicious cycles. And by the way, this one's much shorter. So keep your brain young with music. If you want to firm up your body, head to the gym. If you want to exercise your brain, listen to music. There are a few things that stimulate your brain like what music does, says one Johns Hopkins otolaryngologist. If you want to keep your brain engaged throughout the aging process, listening to or playing music is a great tool. It provides a total brain workout. Research has shown that listening to music can reduce anxiety, blood pressure, and pain, as well as improve sleep quality, mood, mental alertness, and memory. Pause. Again, if you use it right, but again, it can create in some people a vicious addictive cycle where they identify themselves with the disorder, and they use the dopamine release that is caused by sad music to maintain it, and that creates an addiction associated with the brain state, and it becomes very difficult, even if your blood pressure is lowered. Anyways, the brain-music connection. Experts are trying to understand how our brains can hear music and play music. A stereo system puts out vibrations that travel through the air and somehow get inside the ear canal. These vibrations tickle the eardrum and are transmitted into an electrical signal that travels through the auditory nerve to the brainstem, where it is reassembled into something we perceive as music. Johns Hopkins researchers have dozens of jazz performers and rappers improvise music while lying down inside of an fMRI. That's hard to do, man. Gotta stay still in those things. Machine to watch and see which areas of the brains light up. See, they can do it if they want to. Quote, music is a structural, mathematical, and architectural. It's based on a relationship between one note to the next. You may not be aware of it, but your brain has to do a lot of computing to make sense of it. Notes, quote, notes one otolaryngologist. Everyday brain boost for your music. The power of music isn't just limited to interesting research. Try these methods of bringing more music and brain benefits into your life. Jumpstart your creativity. Listen to what your kids or grandkids listen to. Experts suggest. Often we continue to listen to the same songs or genre of music that we did during our teens and 20s, and we generally avoid hearing anything that's not from that era. New music challenges the brain in a way that old music doesn't. It might not feel pleasurable at first, but unfamiliarity forces your brain to struggle to understand new sound. I listen to pop songs sometimes because they're catchy, whatever. But they're using the 4-chord method to get you addicted. Shenanigans. Look up 4 chords. It's a hilarious song. Anyways, recall memory from a long ago. Reach for a familiar music, especially if it stems from the same time period you were trying to recall. Listen to the Beatles. You might bring back your first moment you laid eyes on your spouse, if you're old enough, of course, for instance. So use music to remember stuff. This is actually, and this is off this thing, you could use music in therapy if you're trying to identify a specific traumatic event that's been buried or whatever. What music did you listen to at that age? You can start bringing up emotional states, and sometimes people listen to songs and it brings up intense emotional, and they don't even know why, because they don't realize it's connecting to the memories of that time. So this is an example of using music for therapeutic use, bringing up memories. Of course, if you do it on your own, it may just make you depressed and sad, and you don't even know why. So it's a useful tool for reliving areas in your life and working through emotional trauma and stuff. So back to it. Listen to your body. Pay attention to how you react to different forms of music and pick up the kind that works for you. What helps for one person, concentrate might be distracting to someone else. And what helps one may put another. For me to do work, I need to put on music with nonverbal. I tend to put on like psytrance or trance music. It's very rhythmic and upbeat and happy, and no music. I find words distract me heavily, right? So that's just an interesting thing on positive ways you can enhance your brain and make your brain work for you properly. So there is that. Now let's move to the third of the post, and I just want to say about this post, I was quite pleased with the graphic I did there. It's a satellite overlay of Nablus, one of the 3 large Palestinian cities. We were on a hilltop on the other side, and I overimposed a brain of a depressed person sitting there struggling, and where the brain is allegedly where the settlement we were at. So I thought it was very clever for artistic senses, but it definitely expresses how I felt at that time for sure. So have a listen to part 3 of the actual blog series that inspired this series. Music, a tool to change mood, a personal history, part 3. Fast forward to the middle to latter part of my service. Stationed in Nablus, or Shechem, on a mountaintop next to a Jewish settlement overlooking numerous Arab villages. It was a particularly stressful time, with little sleep, constant guard duty, pointless riot control that was like a stupid game of cat and mouse. At the same time, my best friend at the time and spotter had been selected to go to sergeant school, which means he would be gone. At the time, I didn't realize how having him there was helping me keep my sanity, but apparently my commanders noticed a drastic change in my behavior after that. Outside of the army, almost all of the people whom I had moved to Israel with had either moved off the kibbutz where I was living, or were people I disliked, or vice versa. Nothing had gone to plan, and I felt isolated and alone with no support. I was spiraling into a deep depression, and I didn't even know it at the time. Thankfully, I rediscovered the album Kaleidoscope by Tiesto, which had been released a little over a year previously. Though controversial from his fans as it branched away from his traditional style, it might have literally saved my life. Kaleidoscope by Tiesto. I found myself, when not on guard duty, putting my headphones in and putting on 1 or 2 songs on repeat. I could see pacing around our room or on the base, listening to it on repeat on what could probably look like a zombie with earphones. This time the album was the only thing that brought me any joy. One song often found itself on repeat, Here on This Earth, featuring the Carey Brothers. To quote, "And the sun has fallen, and the backbeats telling truth. that you want to hear and you want to hear again. And the closer that you get with the force of all the weight, and it's clear, do you want to feel her? Want to feel her, want to feel her. For as long as you are here on this earth, I feel alive. For as long as you are here on this earth, I feel alive. And you take your time because we've got all night. Saturdays are nothing. We can do what we want. I'm a sucker for your game. It's the way you tease, and it's so unreal. When we touch the ceiling. For as long as you are here on this earth, I feel alive. For as long as you are here on this earth, I feel alive. Make it so it shakes your heart, nice and slow, but can you let it go? And you feel life fall away, and you have no fear, and you let it go. Just let it go. And you feel life fall away, and you have no fear. Can you let it go? Let it go. For as long as you are here on this earth, I feel alive, feel alive, feel alive, feel alive. Though the song talks about love and a person existing giving the person meaning, for me it was the chorus that helped me. For as long as you are here on this earth, I feel alive. For me, I put myself in place of the lover and protagonist, and as long as I was here on this earth, I felt alive. Just like the warrior, I had imagined myself before coming. I felt alive, and I was fighting for myself emotionally, though at the time I didn't know it. It wasn't until much later, after I returned from Israel and had a manic depressive episode, that I even knew I had depression. But this song grounded me at what would be one of the darker times in my service. Music, a powerful tool. Intuition says so, science says so. So how are you going to use it? Early in my life, I used it to enhance my mood negatively. Later, I used it to motivate and drive me forward. Then I used it to stay alive and feel alive. The trick is not just finding music because it is trendy, but finding music that not only speaks to you personally, but music that can be used positively to enhance your mood. Don't listen to music to enhance dark moods, for this will only make you feel worse. Find music that inspires and motivates you and keeps you feeling alive. Use it as a tool to help you with your mental challenges, so that you can once walk again in peace. Conclusion note. When I chose the topic to write about, I had an entirely different idea in my head of what the final product would look like. But then I started writing. I began to listen to the songs I discussed, some of which I have not listened to for a long time. Not surprisingly to me, though slightly unexpected and certainly surprising to anyone who thinks they know me, these songs bring back relatively strong emotions as I relived these times in my life. This just shows you the power of music and its effect it has on emotion. Despite what people think, even about myself, the robot is only human and still subject to the same general biological rules as everyone else. I thought, am I a warrior at heart and accept my humanity, even if I think emotions cloud judgment far too often for far too many people. So if you have a hard time with emotional control, find the tools and use them positively. Music is just one of the few tools that can help. Okay, so that kind of gives you a better idea of the mindset that I had in the army at that time. I felt abandoned, I felt alone, away from anyone, no support. And at the time in the IDF, I don't know what it's like now, but mental health really wasn't the thing they considered. They have a sort of ranking called, it's like a 32 or something. Maybe that number's wrong. Well, they basically stamp your thing saying you got this mental health ranking, and you basically are discharged from the army. And at the time, I talked to the psychologist, whose English was terrible, which made it very hard for me. But he basically said he's not going to give me that to get out of the army at the time because it ruins your potential prospects for working and living in Israel as far as what you can do. It affects you indefinitely. They really reserve it for people who have like a psychotic break or all of a sudden they develop, say, schizophrenia or some serious mental ailment that you're not functional. And he's like, listen, you're obviously not happy, and you're obviously depressed, but I'm not going to do that to you because you're functional, right? You're fine. As far as an individual, you're smart, you're intelligent, right? And it created a lot of problems. Getting out of the army was a very complicated thing for me, which I'm not going to talk about on this one. One day, perhaps. But you can see it sort of created a state of not happiness. And the two songs there, Tiesto, a lot of people hated that album. I love that album. Obviously, it helped me a lot because it made me feel like I had reasons to live at the time. And, imagine that you're walking around with a gun all day long, every day. And unfortunately, in the IDF and many armies, people do commit suicide all the time. But, this song, I Feel Alive, made me really want to stay alive because it gave me a reason to live. So I was using, in this case, music as a positive thing to reinforce positive feelings so that I could feel better and self-medicate. Now, I self-medicate through music, I mean. Now, I'll talk about when I came back. Some of the people I thought were my friends, this is what I really realized, because I was having a very hard time adjusting. I mean, really. And it basically, I fully admit my behavior may not have been the best, but there was basically zero attempt by people to help me. Like, none. And I mean none. They basically are like, nah, this person's crazy. I don't want to deal with them. And they just stopped. You can realize if you're socially aware, they just stopped contacting me, stopped talking to me, stopped messaging me. It was like pretty clear. So I'm like, whatever, it is what it is. I understand you didn't like my behavior, but at the same time, it's like, you're not very good friends if you don't want to try to help me. Because a lot of them, I've been gone for so long, a lot of them just moved on without me and didn't really care to have me in their life. It's very unfortunate. And then, what happened is I met a girl, and this is where I didn't realize at the time I was actually in a manic state, and a manic state is where you're really elated, high dopamine, serotonin, really happy, just super happy all the time. And then it didn't work out, and I had an immediate crash. And I've talked about this before, where I lost 30 or 40 pounds in 2 weeks. I managed to go to work, and I had the shakes because my body and nervous system is so messed up, and I would just come home and lie on the couch. Here's the thing. Nobody gave a shit. Nobody. And it took me myself to figure out that something was wrong. So this is why when I talk to people about mental health, it's tough for me because my experience is very different. In my experience, I don't have a strong social support network for that kind of stuff. Even to this day, people don't usually come looking to comfort me in any way. And it's been most of my life. I have to do things on my own emotionally. And I got off the couch on my own, went to the doctor, and started a path towards learning what happened. It started with SSRIs, of course, my degree in psychology to give me contextual help. I did some group therapy provided by the city, but it was crap because they're hacky therapists, and some of those people were just really broken, and it just was not a good place. So I stopped doing therapy at the time. I found therapists to be mediocre at best for me because I've never had one that is intelligent enough and has enough general knowledge to be helpful for me. Of course, the best ones in the world, like Esther Perel, I'm not going to be able to get access to. So listen to Esther Perel's stuff, especially for relationship and other things if you want. So, that was me, and my journey was myself, and I'm still working on it. I'm at the point where, for me personally, internally, I think very positively of myself, and I try not to be too overly. But I will say this. Someone recently said to me something about, why are you so confident? I have no explanation for it. I was confident when I was young. People just see it as arrogant. I'm confident now, and people see it as arrogant. And that is hard to deal with when you have a history of depression. And I never thought about that, that perspective. Often the shit people project on us is actually a state of their own insecurities and ego. And if you're a confident person, here's the thing. People actually accuse you of doing that all the time, but you're like, no, I'm just confident, and it's actually their insecurities throwing out. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And we play this battle of people who have depression and anxiety and social issues and issues, and we're all throwing our shit around on everyone, and no one really knows what the hell's going on. But one thing I can say for sure is if you can have a strong internal dialogue with yourself, and I mean, you don't have negative self-talk. You generally like yourself. You're happy internally. You're comfortable with yourself by yourself. it's a lot easier to deal with the nonsense that people throw. Now, I'm not inherently a social person, so I do tend to stick to myself, and of course my partner, who at this point is my best friend in all reality. Who knows if we don't kill each other in the future, because we both have history of mental health. I'm not going to talk about theirs because they don't want me to publicly. I don't think that's fair, so I will not, other than I have learned a lot from living with a person with issues. And I don't have a problem saying the word issues, because it's issues. Because it's faced me to address my own internal things in a way that I've never had to deal with before. Now, during this time, I actually don't listen to a lot of music. As I said earlier, I listen to podcasts because I want to expand my intellectual capacity. So I'm going to link auditory stuff with music. Is that, as someone who felt alone and nobody got me, it's a common feeling we have nowadays. Through podcasts, I now had access to some of the smartest people in the world that I felt no longer alone and isolated, because some of the ideas I have are no longer my own. It's like, oh, there are other people out there who have my ideas. I'm not crazy. This is partially why we're drawn to people who share similar beliefs and ideas. You feel connected and part of something. You have to be careful, though, in doing that you get a perspective. What does the other side feel? Now, I know right now we're in a culture war. I really despise a lot of stuff that people on the left are saying, even from a scientific perspective. It's a bunch of nonsense that's not very well thought out. And it's going down the road of Hitlerian authoritarian idea control. But I don't delete people off my Facebook because they have differing opinions. As strong as emotional reaction some of the stuff they say elicits, I want to see what they have to say. One, because I can see what's happening on the other side, so I'm not blindsided if they do something insane. But also because I really want to give myself perspective. A lot of people don't do that. So I'm just sort of equating ideas and podcasting to music, right? Definitely, though, when I came back to the music theme, I used music to enhance my mood. I don't really recall during my recovery stage what I was listening to, but it wasn't just podcast. It was probably music. I probably listened to a lot of EDM and a lot of electronic music. I like the lack of words. Nowadays I find myself going back to stuff, the memory aspect of music I use when I'm feeling a certain or recalling it. I'll listen to the music associated with the time to recall the memory, just as the research suggests us to do, or have relive a certain emotion. Right, so it's certainly interesting. Now, I would like to point out that I came back from the army and I did not have PTSD, yet people accused people of it. Just because someone's in the military, don't automatically assume PTSD. My issues were different. And by the way, my depression doesn't come from the military. It comes from a family history and years of social ostracization as not fitting in and not finding my in-group. Instead, I just isolated myself and created my own group, UTKM, for example. Although a lot of my students hate the shit I say. They don't like the fact I talk about stuff and they just want to learn to punch and kick. But again, my approach to education is something bigger. I want you to be able to defend yourself mentally, physically, ideologically, not just physically. Because in this world, it's not always just physical anymore. And I think it's rudimentary and simple-minded to think it's only about punching and kicking. Though that is one of the hardest aspects you'll ever have to do. Now, regarding music and depression, I'm going to read another article or aspects of it, because again, this one is quite dense about music and depression. So this one, effects of music on depression levels and physiological responses in community-based older adults. So this one ties heavily into memory and Alzheimer's and elderly people. And this one was actually done in China, I believe, Hong Kong. So it's good to get some stuff that is looking at different ethnic groups, because often studies are only done with university students of this particular type, and especially in Western ones. As much as I dislike the Chinese government, it's good to read research from their universities sometimes. Something like this is not going to be interfered with from the government, I imagine. So here is some stuff from that. This piece. So abstract. Many people over the age of 65 do not regard depression as treatable mental disorder and find it particularly to express themselves verbally. Listening to music can facilitate the nonverbal expression of emotions and allow people's inner feelings to be expressed without being threatened. The aim of the study was to determine the effect of music on depression levels of elderly people. A randomized controlled study was conducted with 47 elderly people. Just to be honest, I think that's a small sample group. Really, studies should start with 100 and work their way up, but budgetary, etc. Anyway, who completed the study after being recruited in Hong Kong. Blood pressure, heart rate, respiratory rate, and depression level variables were collected. In the music group, there were statistically significant decreases in depression scores. The implication is that nurses may utilize music as an effective nursing intervention for patients with depression symptoms in a community setting. Pause on that. If you were in an old folks' home during COVID, music could have been an amazing way to fix the extreme isolation that they were certainly facing. Did you? Is a good question. Back to it. Introduction. Studies have shown that as many as 24% of older adults in the USA and 35% in China report depressive symptoms. Wilson et al., Wu et al. It's really good of them, by the way, to cite multiple sources from in their country and out of their country. In a comparative study of middle-aged, 65 or below, and old age, 65 and above group, the prognosis of relapses of recurrences was found to be much more frequent among older patients. This begs the question of whether continued treatment for depression in older adults is effective. The study indicates that elderly people are at risk of inferior treatment response and poor antidepressant tolerability. This results in consistent with another study which revealed that many older adults were more physically unhealthy and had activities limited by depression. Pause. That's a big one. Older people tend to be unhealthy. So if they don't have good healthy lifestyles and good social networks, they will be mentally impaired and physically impaired. If you don't use it, you lose it. Look at old people who exercise their whole lives, never stop. They look great, feel great. Versus if you go into older phones where they just sort of sit there and stare at nothing all day. They are on doorsteps. Okay, continuing. Depression in the elderly. Depression can be an early indicator of the presence of one of the aforementioned medical conditions in the reference study. Patients with Alzheimer's disease suffer a progressive decline with their stress threshold. Gerder 97 proposed a mid-range theory incorporating these elements to discussion to use individualized music to alleviate agitation. The theory postulates that music would stimulate memory or remote events and elicit of memories associated with positive feelings would have a soothing effect and alleviate or decrease agitated behaviors. Within the Chinese community, failure to report depression mood to one's physician as a symptom is relatively common. Pause. With a partner who's Chinese, and I grew up around this, it is not common to discuss emotions openly in it's particularly in the Chinese culture. It's something that I hope they can work on as a culture, but it's still something in progress. Continuing, the illness beliefs of Chinese patients who are depressed in one study reflected a focus on their physical symptoms and seldom highlighted their depression as their chief concern. Lie 99. In fact, many patients with depressions do not regard it as a treatable mental disorder. I have not seen this word. Concomitantly, it's just difficult. Another belief of patients, as suggested by Cheng 1989, is the health professionals are more interested in their physical state than the psychological symptom. Pause. Doctors, you suck. Okay, I'm going to say this. Grow up. Learn more, expand your knowledge to nutrition, health and wellness, and mental health. Most of the doctors I go to here are garbage and give bad advice in such a linear fashion. Yeah, I can't stress this enough. Doctors need to be better. And if you can't, the robots, I'll gladly let them take over. Anyways, for medical diagnosis. Thus, the older adults with depression may allow their depressive symptoms to go untreated. Cold something that I reference. The prevalence of depression symptoms among elderly Chinese was estimated at 35% in a local study. Older age Chinese with depression suffer from both emotional and somatic disturbances, but are more likely to focus on their physical problems and believe that their emotional problems result from their physical disturbances. Pause. That's not true. It's interconnected. Your physical state affects mental, and mental affects physical. I can say from personal, anecdotal, and just general evidence. And continuing, a poor quality of life. In addition, they find it difficult to express themselves verbally. Music as a vehicle of feeling can facilitate nonverbal expression of emotion, and music can reach people's inner feelings without being threatening and can be a tool for emotional catharsis. Therefore, the study focused on the effects of listening to music on depression in the elderly. Pause. It's quite dense, so be prepared. Continuing, use of music intervention in healthcare. The prevalence use of music activity in various settings is well documented in the literature. Existing research on the use of music activity in healthcare settings has ranged from acute inpatient care, including surgical, coronary care, there's a whole bunch of citations, critical care and oncology settings, to outpatient care, including nursing home settings for agitated residents, and home care settings for patients with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, chronic osteoporosis, chronic non-malnutrition, etc., sleep disturbances, and depression. Holy crap, it goes on and on and on and on. So it's saying music can basically help with mood in various ailments, and positive mood will help in recovery. That's just been proven factually. In all these settings, studies have frequently reported that the use of music is perceived as an effective and has been commonly employed locally. However, studies on the effect of music as a therapy for patients seem to be confined within institutional settings. For instance, surgical patients for music intervention were selected for pre- or post-operative procedures to those who suffer from anxiety, and those with mechanical ventilation. An investigation into the use of musical intervention, the community setting for older adults, could enhance understanding of the use of music intervention. Entrainment of body rhythms. Some studies indicated that music exerts its effects through the entertainment of body and rhythm. Entertainment is defined as a tendency for those oscillating bodies to lock into phases and thus vibrate the harmony. This is like individuals' pulsing heart music cells, which, when they are brought closer together, begin pulsing in synchrony. When a person is experiencing discomfort, anger, or stress, their body rhythms such as breath, heart rate, and blood flow will change. In a person stressed or angry, adrenaline will be released from the adrenal medulla, affecting their breathing and heart rate and leading to changes in blood pressure, respiratory rate, heart rate, and oxygen saturation. A study showed that close relationship was found between music rhythm and listeners' breathing or respiratory patterns. So maybe slow music might slow your breathing down. Other studies have suggested that as resolution may be experienced in the listeners physiologically or emotionally. Their findings supported entrapment. So basically, all the studies I've read in this are saying the same thing. Measurably, physiologically, there are differences in your body when you listen to music. How we bring that out cognitively and realize how to use it usefully is a very different story. It's only become more extensively researched in the modern times. And it goes through the study. I'll skip the actual study, though it is interesting. Findings, demographics, and health history variables. There were 58 eligible participants. Again, I think it's a small sample size. And I think people need to stop doing that. They need to consolidate their studies with more people and less overall studies to get information quicker. Anyways, 8 of whom refused to participate. However, 2 participants in the experimental group refused to continue during the 30-minute intervention because they did not like the choice of music. Back in my day, this music is garbage. Anyways, also 1 participant in the control group refused to continue during to have no time when the baseline data was being collected. Blah, blah, blah. It's too statistical. I'm not going to read you that. Let me look at discussion. Let's just skip to the discussion. Because they're basically, when you're doing results, don't just do statistics if you want normal people to read it. Music stimuli experts, biology meaningful effect on human behavior by engaging specific brain functions involving in a memory, learning, and multiple motivational and emotional states. Pointed out that music evokes psychological responses because of its influence on the limbic system. Hey, everything is connected. How many systems have I mentioned? How many parts of the brain have I mentioned? Right? Everything is connected. The fact that the perception of music leads to the stirring of emotion experiences is an indicator that the limbic system is engaged in processing music stimuli and that this system is influenced by musical pitch and rhythm, etc. It goes on. Conclusion, very short. Music intervention is a non-invasive and inexpensive nursing intervention. It may help nurses build therapeutic relationships with elderly patients, and nurses are encouraged to use music as part of their holistic caring for the patient. Study has shown music is an effective method for reducing psychological and depressive responses arising for the group. Right, so that's a very well done study. I skipped a lot of it because to be honest, I'm getting a bit tired at this point of reading statistical stuff. But you get the idea. And again, this was from online library at wiley.com. And it's from Hong Kong University, right? International Journey of Mental Nursing is where it was original. Mental Health for Nursing was where it was originally posted. So this series this episode has gone somewhere where I didn't think it would go, and I kind of went all over the place. But to connect it back in, I was using a story of my own, how I used music positively and negatively to enhance my life. Although in the stories I'm telling, I used it as a positive one, to inspire me, to keep me out of a worse depression, and you can use it to enhance you. Because of how it interacts with the parts of your brain to do with addiction, it can keep you in a negative state through inadvertent, even though your physiological state is better, your mental state may not, because you're being addicted to a thing. A negative state, and your body and your behavior is connecting the state of being depressed with the positive feeling of the music. And so often, again, that's why people will repeat negative music forever and ever to make themselves feel better. And it's a fucked up cycle. But you should use music as a tool to change your mood for the good. So I talked about a variety of studies, and I talked about my personal experience and how it can use. I am a very auditory person, so I prefer listening to stuff than watching stuff. Unless, it's a movie. I like watching movies and stuff to get like narrative and teach myself narrative methodology just through doing it enough, watching it enough. But anyways, how does music affect your life? Are you using it to enhance your mood, or are you using it to keep a negative mood? Be conscious of what's going on, because if you're not careful, you aren't healing. Don't associate your identity with your disorder. Acknowledge it and figure out ways to grow and make your own identity that is you. I am John, hear me roar. Right? Be more confident. And the more confidence that you are, the more you're going to know people are going to hate you no matter what you do. So the more confidence and positive internal view you have, the less it bothers you, the more you just do. Now, I'm not infallible to this. I have days and moments where I don't fit in and I struggle. And on those days, I will use music to enhance my mood. And you can see great positive benefits. So I hope that this episode has given you some perspective on how to utilize music and to think about how music affects your life. And are you using it in a positive way? So thank you for listening. And of course, if you want to support this podcast and more online content, you can click on the Support Us page of utkmblog.com/support us. And you can either simply donate to us, or you can do it a one-time or monthly or annual. The more the better. Or you can sign up at UTKMU to learn how I teach Krav Maga, at least the novice and beginner curriculums, or you can click on the affiliate links under the Support Us banner, and you can buy products that I support and use myself, and support this podcast, and you can get healthier mentally and physically in the process, because I'm mostly putting up intellectual knowledge up there, links, or stuff I use to positively benefit my health. So I hope, again, this has been a helpful podcast to understand music and its effects on brain and mood, using my own sort of personal story as a narrative to move the information forward. So thank you for listening to this episode of Warriors Day.
You're listening to The Warriors Day. Brought to you by Urban Tactics Krav Maga, turning lambs into lions.